The UK property market has come in for some shock headlines recently, most of which are calling for the end of the boom in prices and the prospects for negative equity. But what about the top end of the market? Clearly, there will always be a limited number of buyers that don't need to sell or need to take out a mortgage. But however many of these there may be, there will never be enough to support the entire market, which will mostly be relying on sellers and buyers lower down the price range that do rely on a fully functioning market, and that includes the availability of affordable mortgages. Welcome to this edition of IG Trading the Markets podcast. I'm Jeremy Naylor. We're speaking today to Nick Staten. Nick is the founder and very much hands-on senior partner of Staten's Estate Agents, which covers the top end of the market in and around North London and Hertfordshire in both sales and lettings across a number of branches. Nick, welcome. It's a pleasure to be able to catch up with you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Very nice for you to invite me. Thank you very much.
First, how would you describe the market as it is from your position, both geographically and at your price point?
Well, if we go back to the terrible situation that we had with unprecedented times with the pandemic, there was a formula that started to happen in the property market that's never happened before. I was getting people contacting me saying that they needed to move nearer their family and children. They were scared of lockdowns again, and therefore they wanted to be in certain areas. Some people also had a certain amount of money in the banks, which they would prefer to put into property, which then they could maybe rent out as well. And basically, it was people moving towards families where we were never expecting that to come so quickly. And obviously the sales that we did, and due to the properties that we had for sale, started selling and moving very quickly. Even though it was a terrible time for everybody, the property market seemed to strengthen up. And obviously we had the stamp duty saving from the government, which was an amazing boost for it.
COVID and lockdowns clearly steered things around that period. As you say, people were very worried, and we were hearing a lot of anecdotal evidence of people wanting to leave cities and, as you say, get back to family. But of course, the top end of the market is known for the interest from overseas. What proportion of overseas buyers to those that are based in the UK do you see in your market?
The overseas buyers are very strong again now. Obviously, through the pandemic, they had to, stay where they were, so to speak. But because of North London and the schools and the facilities and everything else, the overseas buyers are definitely wanting properties out of London. They were normally more into London, but they came out of London because they wanted the land and the grounds and everything else, but not being too far from getting back to London if they wanted to be. And the market that we have at the moment with overseas buyers is very exciting. Our website, which we were very surprised at, attracts so many more people on the international market than ever before. So we knew that this was going to happen, and it actually did happen. And we have many sales to overseas buyers who actually came and settled here very quickly with schooling and everything else, but not being too far out of London, in a network of areas around Hertfordshire going towards London.
To what degree do you think some sort of normality has been restored to the market? Let's take out the current economic developments that are happening just at the moment. I'll talk about those in just a minute. But do you think there is a return to some sort of normality now that we've seemingly, at least here in the UK, got on top of COVID, or at least learned to live with it? Do you think that normality has been restored by and large?
In certain cases, I think it has been. But at the same time, the market is sort of definitely strengthened up completely on where it was in regards to the COVID situation. But the properties have been coming onto the market because the vendors, which are the people who are wanting to sell these properties, and some of them are very large estates, have realised that there is a new market for them to sell now to people coming out of London and they're the ones who've been getting some really very exciting prices for their homes. And we've been very fortunate to sell to some fabulous families.
Mm. What factors affect the top end? I mean, of course, 4 years ago we went into Brexit. There's been a heavy increase in the stamp duty burden. Of course, as prices rise, a proportion of that obviously goes hand in hand with a higher stamp duty burden. For overseas buyers, of course, there's the prospects of buying at a cheaper rate because of weaker sterling. What do you see as the big factors that affect houses being sold and bought at the top end of the housing market?
Well, it gets back to people wanting a certain type of home that they're looking for. And the most important thing that we find is, one of the questions is, how far from London are we? And we're very close in this area. We're 9 miles away from London. Our Totteridge office is London N20, which is in London. So the people coming out now who want to be closer to family and friends and make sure that the facilities are right for them are looking at the top market, but at the same time, they've got very strong what they want as well in that market, and what they expect. The international buyers who are coming over, they're much happier to buy homes in fabulous order. They haven't got the energy and the timing to put into refurbishing properties. So the homes that have been sold have mainly been in very updated order and have achieved extremely good prices.
But let's take the points I mentioned though in order, because has Brexit had a headwind in your market?
Well, Brexit, yeah, when we had Brexit, it was a scare. We didn't see what the changes would be with Brexit. And then Brexit was lost because of the pandemic. It all just disappeared and everyone was talking about the pandemic. You couldn't get people to fly in to look at properties. This is where the videos and the online details of properties with drones and everything started to be far more important, because certain families over here who wanted their families, like their grandparents, to come over or their fathers to come over and have a look at properties, they couldn't get to London or to any of the areas. And Brexit really became something that wasn't talked about. I think without the pandemic, I think Brexit would have been a much more major factor.
What about the stamp duty burden? I mean, we've referenced this already, and obviously the higher the price, the bigger the stamp duty is. Is this something that the buyers that you see, are they concerned about that? Is that something that would prevent them from buying at that level, or do you find that they've got the money and they don't really worry too much about it?
At certain price ranges, obviously the stamp duty is a very high cost to them. But when you do your valuations with the owners of these properties, it's sometimes mentioned, you do realise what the stamp duty would be for an ongoing purchaser. And there's a phrase that we use, we've all got to share the pain, because the vendor has to lose a little bit on his property because he's got to try and help the price right with the stamp duty costs. And the buyer knows he's got to pay the stamp duty. And obviously, at extremely high price properties, it's not such an effect as when you work the prices down, so to speak. But stamp duty is a big difference, and you have to take it into account from selling the property to also buying the property when you negotiate the price. It's amazing how, when we negotiate prices, it's amazing how many owners who've lived in homes for 20, 25 years who have now decided to sell because everything's too big, or they want to move to another area or downsize and release money, etc. Until you actually explain to them the cost of stamp duty to the ongoing purchaser, it's amazing. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. It's amazing how many vendors don't realise sometimes what stamp duty costs.
Just doing a
Yeah.
doing a quick calculation. A £3 million house, I think, has something like £275,000 worth of stamp duty. But look, let's move on from that, because I want to talk about a lot more about the top end of the market, which I think to a lot of people is fascinating. In your area of the market, where we're talking about houses that's not necessarily top end, but within your bracket, do you see most people needing a mortgage, or do you see mostly cash buyers?
No, most people, Jeremy, are still looking at mortgages, and they're very much wanting to get the valuation on the property done through their mortgage company, so that they can still get mortgages, and mortgages are still there. What we have seen is that at the moment, some of the valuations that the banks are doing for lending money are slightly starting to cool off on the value of the property. They're trying to downsize the valuation on the mortgage so that people aren't borrowing too much and getting themselves into too risky positions. But yeah, the question you asked, are mortgages still there at the high end market? Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk about the new developments then in the market and the economy at the moment. Now, one of the other things I know that's been seen in the market of late has been this idea of pitching buyers into a sealed bid situation where prices can rise over and above the market price, in some cases by a considerable margin. Do you, at your sort of area of the market, do you get involved with this sort of thing? I mean, we're talking enormous sums sometimes over the asking price that are achieved by a seller through the sealed bid process. Does it work, do you think, to the long-term advantage of the property market?
Well, it works in a way. People don't like it, obviously, but the situation is, with less properties on the market and still very many ready and willing and able buyers out there, you've many times now, and I can give you examples, but you've many times get two or three people after the same property. On that basis, it's very difficult, and it would be wrong to choose a buyer if they're all in the same position of strength to buy the property. So the vendors say, look, the best thing we can do is, we've got two or three people at the asking price. Let's see if any of them want to go to sealed bids, and we'll go for best and final offers. And we do a lot of it. Yeah, we do a lot of it now. This is something that 2 or 3 years ago was very rare. But now, because of the less properties available for the market and still many, many buyers out there in all the price ranges, it is difficult when someone makes you an offer and then you get 2 or 3 other viewers who make the same offer. So the safest and best way is to let them make their final offers by sealed bids, so there's no favoritism when the offers come through.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was looking at Statons.com yesterday, because I was looking at this area of the sales market where you talk about undisclosed, secret selling, off market, under the radar. I don't know what the best way to describe this is, and you go into details of each one, but I think broadly speaking they're the same thing, aren't they? That houses in some cases never actually make it to market. Now, this is another relatively new development as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how new it really is, and whether it actually works to the benefit of both buyer and seller. In what circumstances would you recommend this sort of course of action? Because if a house never comes to market, you never testing the market to see just precisely what the price should be.
Yeah, this is something that has become now very much more asked about and talked about than it ever has been before. The situation is, as all good agents know, they have a very strong database of applicants who've either lost a property recently, they've had a bad survey on another property, or a chain's broken, and they're in a very strong buying position. And they really want to know what is coming on the market as soon as possible. And the vendors, the people who are selling, are absolutely delighted that we can, within days after having the property checked and everything done correctly, on lining the property up and going live, we can inform buyers who have lost out on properties or who are very keen to buy properties, of properties that are even before photography is done, are available to them. And all good agents will tell you that they've got databases of these applicants. And we have many undisclosed, as you said, on our website, statons.com. On the undisclosed page, I think we put 5 or 6 last week on it, just to let people know that we need to know who the buyers are, because we've got a lot of properties that the vendor, to start with, would like to see if they can get their price without going to the full market using all the portals. It makes it very strong for a vendor, because if a buyer is one of the buyers who wants to buy the property and wants to stop it going live, then he's got to make his best offer. And therefore, he doesn't turn around and try and renegotiate, because he's so keen to buy a home and he falls in love and he finds the right home that he says to himself, well, I can't afford to lose this one. I lost the other one for whatever reason. And then the vendor, in many cases, gets the best price. And in our industry, we always say your best offers normally are your first offers. And the reason for that is that these are the keenest buyers, that if you ring them up, and my negotiators have their database in all the price ranges, and they ring them up and say, here's an address for you, this is a property, they immediately, as they know the negotiator knows what they're looking for, say, right, I'd like to see it tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. So it's that quick when you go undisclosed, no problem. And people like it because it just brings the real buyers to you. And friends of mine over the whole of the country have said, you know, how do I get to this market? How do I find my agent? And I said, look, you don't email them. You don't just go online. You don't just fill in a form. You call the agent, or now you're allowed to pop in. You go in and see the agent, let them know exactly what you're looking for. Make sure they remember you. We have what we call a hot box, where we write these people down in a card formula, so we have them so quick in our minds. And a good agent takes on a property, he goes and values the property, signs it up correctly, and then literally when he gets back to the office, they've got half a dozen people they should be able to ring immediately before it goes live on all the portals. And the buyers are buying on that basis very much at the moment.
Look, we've got to wrap this up in a minute. So I really want to talk about the current environment. And many people say we learn by historical events. In your experience, having seen downturns before and how they develop, how do you see the remainder of this year? Or does the current environment strike you as being different from previous economic events that look like they're developing into a downturn? How do you feel about the market at the moment?
Well, like everyone, I'm concerned about the market, because I believe there has to be a cooling off on this market, because the cost of everything now, and people talking about all the costs involved with their lifestyle and everything else. I don't think we've seen a market like this. Yes, I have had downturn markets where certain industries have had difficulty, so therefore certain buyers aren't able to buy at the time. But the way people are talking about this market is that so many people are going to be could be affected with the cost of living, so to speak, and the cost of mortgages going up, etc., that I'm saying to people, this is the time to sell, because I don't know in a few months' time whether or not this market's going to be as strong as it is at the moment.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. Time will tell. Nick, in the meantime, I want to thank you so much indeed for your time explaining the market at the top end of what's happening here, certainly in North London and Hertfordshire. It's a pleasure to be able to catch up with you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Very nice to invite me. Thank you again. Thank you.
That's Nick Staton. Nick is the founder and hands-on and senior partner of Staton's Estate Agents in North London. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGCom, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.